Chag Sameach. Chag Sameach. When my family first moved to France from Jerusalem, and I was in the first grade, teachers did not communicate much to my parents about how this was all going to work for me. And so we just did what everybody said was the only way to learn a language, which I knew nothing about, which you just sit and absorb it, and then somehow magically you're supposed to learn the language by taking it all in. So the months passed and months passed. We arrived in December. It wasn't working. They said, don't worry, this is how it's always going to happen. You don't have to worry about it. I was just going along, even though I wasn't not understanding anything more than I did the very first day I came. And suddenly the end of the year came. They said to me, well, we're very sorry for you, but you have to repeat first grade because your French comprehension and reading level isn't what it needs to be. So my parents protested and said, well, didn't you say that it was going to be okay? And they didn't care, wouldn't hear anything of it. Nothing else you can do. So my parents took me to see a tutor, and I had one summer until they were willing to give me another test to see if I could go to second grade. But they told me it only happened if you put in a tremendous amount of effort and work to do it. And I remember thinking, I'm going to do this. So by the end of the summer, when I returned, I came back and everyone couldn't believe it. I was speaking French and reading French and doing well in school. And I remember taking that little exam they gave me, which they were sure I was going to fail. But I passed it. I got into second grade. I remember feeling very happy about it. But to make something happen, you have to work for it in life. It's as the joke about the man who keeps praying to God, why can't I ever win the lottery? Why can't I ever win the lottery? Eventually God appears to him and says, will you buy a ticket already? You have to buy a lottery ticket, and you have to be willing to do some of the work to make it happen. And this is also what our tradition believes. And in our reading this morning, finally the crossing of the sea, the redemption, the deliverance, and the children of Israel are crying out to God and to Moses as usual. Was it for want of graves in Egypt that you brought us out to die in the wilderness? What have you done taking us out of Egypt? Is not this what we told you? Let us be. We just want to serve the Egyptians. For is it better than dying here? On one side was all of Pharaoh's chariots coming racing towards them. On the other side was the sea, and the children of Israel stuck in between. And Moses cries back out to them, have no fear, stand by and witness the deliverance. But then nothing happens. No deliverance. Right? The children of Israel until then, they were used for God was doing everything for them, plague after plague. They just sat back and witnessed. God did everything. The blood, the frogs, the boils, the hail, the darkness. The magicians couldn't keep up. All of Pharaoh's will was whittled down. And the Israelites, they just witnessed. They had light in Goshen while there was darkness in the rest. But here, finally, to see God is silent. He was not going to open the seas unless they showed at least a little bit of agency and did a little bit of something, played a part, willing to put in effort. Mati tzakalai, why are you crying to me, he says to Moses. Tell the Israelites, go forward already. And then we have that beautiful midrash of one man, Nachshon ben Aminadav, who takes the first step into the waters, and the waters part. Why are you crying to me? Walk in. We have to be willing to walk into the waters. And up until then, they just followed along. And he was going to part the waters. That was part of the plan. But they had to at least take a step, at least be willing to walk in, show faith. Why are you asking me? Jump in the water. Now, rabbis like to compare this period to, in the desert, the whole period of wandering and of learning to be free, to a parent teaching a child to walk. Rabbi Levi Yitzchak says this. When you teach a child to walk, you hold them, and then you let go, and then they have to take the steps by themselves. And we know as parents, it's hard to let children do what they have to do, to let them step in, and sometimes it doesn't always go so well. We can't come and help every time. If you don't let go, then they'll never learn to walk. And this is a moment where they have to learn to take a step. And if you don't take those early first steps and learn how to take them yourself, how will you do when you have more serious steps you have to take much later on in life? And this applies to children, but to all of us as well. And despite how painful and challenging it is in all the different areas of life, each one of us have to learn how to take our own steps and take the action ourselves and rely on our own self. Or you will not be able to swim. And the Talmud says one of the commandments that's upon parents is to teach their children to swim. They have to learn how to swim and rely on their own wisdom and ability to stand on their own 2 feet and be willing to get wet. And as a Jewish people, we've also learned this too. For 2,000 years, we waited and waited for Mashiach to come and to return us back to our land. And at a certain point, we said, we need to do something too. And if we hadn't, if we had followed those who said, don't you dare try and make it happen, let's just keep on waiting and waiting for divine agency, we would still be waiting. And at the same time, in this day, on the end of Pesach, Shvi'i, 7th day, as we celebrate this greatest miracle that was ever done to the Jewish people by God, we also think about our part in all of it. That like life requires our steps and action and energy. Leaving Egypt requires our own heart and mind and effort. But the promise of this story is if we do play our parts in it, if we take our step, and if we walk into the waters, despite the fears and despite all those who say, this will never be, and slaves will always be slaves, and masters will always remain as masters. But if we instead listen to the voice within, then we will experience victory, and sometimes the universe will also help us in parting the waters and raising us to salvation so that we may walk free towards Sinai and the Promised Land. Chag Sameach.